back to Dental Unfiltered. I'm Matt Brown, and of course, I'm here with my normal partner, Dr. Andrew Vallo. Today, we're going to talk about a really cool subject. Everyone's always trying to do this. I talk to docs every day, and they're like, how can I have less chair time and more time to work on the business instead of being in the trenches of dentistry? Everyone kind of wants to be their own CEO of their group. And today, we're going to talk about dentist to CEO and what the transition was like for Andrew going from 3 or 4 clinical days a week down to one to almost none, and what the transition process was like going dentist to CEO, and what was the critical points to really make it work. So Andrew, first, you've done a bunch of startups now, and you've always had this goal of like less clinical days. I think anyone listening to this who's in our audience who's growth minded is all somewhere in the back of their head got less clinical days, right? And that seems like a mounting hard problem because I think docs think in their head, well, if I do less clinical days and I have an associate do the work, because they're getting 32% or whatever it is, I'm going to make less. But in reality, they end up making more because they're focusing on the right things to grow the business if you're a business minded dentist, right? So, first, what was like, how did you talk yourself into getting over that hurdle of like just pulling back and having faith that you could do it? Because that's the hardest part.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, guys? Cool episode today. I think this topic is pertinent not just to those of you that are interested in doing multi-location dental groups. I think anyone who owns a dental practice could benefit from becoming a better leader and a better CEO, of your own dental office. So, you often hear the cliche phrase of working on your business, not in your business. I think it's a super important concept because, if you're one of those dentists seeing patients 4.5, 5 days a week, it leaves very little time for you to actually focus on everything outside of the direct patient care. And your business is going to suffer because of that. It's going to limit your growth capacity. It's going to limit your ability to really fine tune your systems. It's going to limit your ability to focus on your patient experience and the culture, of your team. So whether you are a solo dentist who owns one practice, or you're someone in a situation like me where you have a couple practices and you're trying to grow, I think it is important that you truly become a CEO of your business. Now, obviously, for me, it's been a more direct transition. When I first opened my first startup, I started at 3 days clinical. All of my startups open at 3 full days, and then as we grow, we add a fourth day. And I kind of intentionally set it up so that when we grew to the point where I was ready to add a fourth day, that's actually when I brought my first associate. I've never gone above 3 days since I've been a practice owner. I did cut down to 2 days after about a year and a half or so. I cut back to 2 days a week. And then more recently, earlier this year, I cut back to 1 day a week clinically. And that obviously opens up a lot more admin time for me to really focus on all of the behind the scenes stuff. So,
It's I was just actually it's crazy we're talking about this today because I was just at one of your practices shadowing for 2 days with two of my docs, or one of my docs and one of my guys from my practice down in Texas. And I've been to your other two practices. I've been to your two newest startups, and the culture is very uniform. Now there's like little idiosyncrasies, little differences, but the culture is really the same in all the practices I've been in with yours. I think one of the barriers when you're going from dentist to CEO is you're the clinical leader, now you're the business leader, and docs are like, how do I maintain this culture across multiple practices and run it? And I think from what I've seen in your organization, you do a good job of transferring that culture from you to the next level, and the next level transfers it down to the next level. So when docs are like, man, I'm going to go to these multi units, multiple practices, I want to try to be a CEO, the hurdle of culture becomes a real problem. So when you become the CEO and you remove yourself from being a dentist, if you had to like kind of prioritize how much time you invest in the culture to make sure it's maintained, is that like 80%, 50%? Like what is the effort that goes into actually maintain that culture, and how did you do it?
I think culture is a tricky thing. It's something that I am still constantly trying to figure out the best approaches for it. Obviously, when you grow as quickly as we have, it becomes even more difficult to maintain that culture. But I do think it's something that in the early stages I had overlooked a little bit. And this year, I would say it's one of our main focuses is really getting back to that patient experience. How can we go above and beyond? How can we become the Ritz-Carlton of dentistry? How can we add those extra touch points? But as much as we want to take care of our patients, we got to take care of our teams first. So if it's very tough to expect your teams to provide 5-star patient experience if they are not treated the same way. So you've got to take care
That's
of
a
your own
really
first.
good point.
So we are really focusing on it. We're really focusing. I've said it a few times on the podcast recently. We're really focusing on positivity. That is actually becoming it will become one of our new core values here this year is positivity. So that's a big focus for us. We are celebrating our wins both within the offices and morning huddles and as a group. We now have our company wide WhatsApp chat, and a few times a week, different people, including myself, are posting wins, celebrating, sending out love bombs to different offices, different team members for things that they've accomplished. So I think that's huge. We've implemented quarterly team bonding activities that the offices are funding for each office kind of gets their own quarterly team bonding activity. We've implemented our first annual company-wide team summit day, which I'm really excited about. We'll do a whole podcast episode about that soon.
I actually I found out about it while I was in Florida, and I kind of want to go.
Yeah, man. It's honestly it's going to be a cool day. I mean, we're paying our whole teams, for the full Friday. We're closing the offices down. We're renting out a conference room at a hotel. So, like I said, we'll do a full episode breaking down exactly what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. I'm really seeing the value of developing an even better team culture, and we are investing time and money into really putting an emphasis on that this year. So I think that's huge. Going back to something you had asked earlier, Matt, that I think I kind of forgot to answer, but you had asked like when you start cutting back clinical days, when you start bringing in associates, the fear is it's going to impact your production, your income. And I think that's a valid concern. And that is something that, you need to think about if that's a direction that you're heading. I think it's twofold. I think, first of all, you've got to kind of know like what's your bare ass minimum that you need to feed your family and pay your mortgage and things like that. So like how much money do you need to make in a given year in order to do that? And obviously, if you've been good about saving money, maybe it's less. Maybe you're like, hey, honestly, if I don't really take any money home this year, it's not a huge deal. I've got enough in savings that I can kind of float things, and that makes it even easier. But like let's just say, for example, you're a practice owner, you're taking in $500,000 a year, and you're like, I want to grow my practice. I want to bring in associates. I want to bring myself back clinically and into more of a CEO role. You got to sit there and ask yourself, like, do you really need to make 500K this year? Would you be okay with 300K or 150? I mean, like, again, depending on what your situation is, what your living costs are, what your savings look like. If you don't need to make that much money that year, it's a little bit easier to do that transition because now you're less dependent on the profits of the practice. Because, like, honestly, that's the only way to offset it. If you're growing enough, you're adding multiple practices, each practice is fairly profitable. Those practice profits, the profit sharing can then offset the production income that you used to make as a dentist. And you can try to strategically plan it out that way, but there's no guarantee. If you're the main dentist, you're doing all the dentistry, yeah, you could have a little bit of a slower year, but you've got a pretty good idea of what you're going to take home. If you take yourself out of the chair, for the most part, you cut back to 1 or 2 days a week and you've significantly cut back on your production income, you really are just kind of almost at that point hoping that your practices are profitable enough to, help offset the money that you've lost. And the other thing to keep in mind, guys, is it's tougher to be profitable when you're in growth phase. So, when you're adding a couple practices a year, you've got these new startups, the things that I'm doing, we have fortunately been very profitable for startup offices, but still you've got to keep that in mind too. If your goal is growth, you've got this long-term focus. So, don't get lost in the weeds. And again, as long as your family's going to be okay, you can pay your bills. Like, don't sweat it if that year you take home significantly less than you have in the past, because it's getting you one step closer to your long-term goals of having a bigger better dental organization and having more freedom yourself if you're able to step away from the chair either completely or at least, for the most part. So,
I think part of it too is I talk to docs every day, all day. Like literally, what I do all day long is this, just with docs, and it's not recorded. We talk about their practices and their growth goals. I feel like there's a mindset that's pretty uniform. So there's docs that like kind of know they want to get an associate and they should, and they're kind of scared to do it because of what you just explained. Like it's kind of like a chicken or the egg scenario. And the reality is, you need time for the egg to incubate to become the chicken, right? And
yeah.
the dentist is like, well, I want the chicken now, so I don't have my income hurt. And it's like, but when the chicken comes, now you got two chickens, and now they're both laying eggs, and you just have to wade that out, right? And I think, and I hope this doesn't offend any of the dentists. I think that the same doc who is scared of that process is the same doc who goes to a CE course and gets implant trained and then starts looking for only the perfect cases and also is scared to kind of jump in. I think part of it is, guys, when you feel that fear, like you're like, this could be painful, right? That's the first indicator that you're going towards growth, because there's no growth without stress and discomfort of some level, right? It just doesn't exist, right? And if you're getting that gut feeling like, I don't know, like that's probably the right choice. When people say listening to your gut, it's not that like your gut's going to tell you like bing bing bing, this is it. Your gut is like, ooh, this could get painful, this is probably the right direction, get out of my comfort zone. And I think
Yeah.
that's really what holds docs back. Is I think it's the same psychological mindset possibly. And it's like, what really happens is create a practice of jumping in with both feet and trying to swim. So if you jump in with both feet and do it and just go for it and wait for the egg to incubate, you'll develop the confidence to do it in the operatory with implants, to do it with a sinus lift, or to do it with hiring an associate. And that bravery that you develop is really important for becoming that CEO.
Yeah, no, I think that is a great point, Matt. I think serious growth requires some level of discomfort. I mean, like honestly,
Massive amounts of it, actually, really.
coming from a guy who's opened 4 dental startups in 3 years, you think you eventually just become immune to it. You become desensitized to
No.
it. And maybe to some degree that you do, but like it never goes away, guys. Like, all right, so like currently I'm working on 3 different projects that could potentially add 3 more quick startups to my group. We could go from 4 to 7 offices before the end of 2024 here. If you think that there's no level of discomfort for me, there's no level of stress, if you think I don't ever have those what the hell am I doing moments, you'd be wrong. I mean, absolutely I do. I mean, but again, if if you don't continually push, your comfort zone, you're never going to achieve that significant growth, that you may be seeking. So,
I want to ask you another question about that.
yeah.
I think part of it becomes the chicken or the egg fear. There's a second level of fear with dentist to CEO that I think is an issue. And I was with you at Dental Podfest when you were launching 2 practices in the same week, and we were sitting waiting to do our panel, and like you're getting these crazy text messages, everything's going wrong, and your head is down, and you're like shaking your head, and I could just tell you're stressed out of your mind. And we had to go on and speak at a panel, right? And you're opening 2 practices at the same time. 2 sets of PMS, 2 sets of staff. I think another layer of fear that comes, I'd love to hear your view on this, is the first fear is the chicken or the egg problem with your income and the risk, right? The second fear is the ability to delegate these critical responsibilities and trust people to do their jobs. Like docs want to hold on control of everything because there's like no trust in your staff, and that's really a cultural problem with you, but also like that's, I think it's the second layer of fear. So after we get, okay, so we're gonna do the practice. I'm gonna jump into 2 feet. Now I gotta hire the staff, and I had my staff at your practice, and we were in the break room, and my staff asked a question. They said, after we were shattering your guys, which your guys were amazing. They said, how does he hire like the best team? I was like, no, he doesn't hire the best team. His leadership gets the best out of people. And I think the next layer of fear is like when you hand off these critical tasks to somebody and you can't see they did it right. How do you develop the faith in your team and the trust and get over that level of fear? Because that's the next level of fear with doing the CEO transition, is actually trusting people with critical tasks.
I used to be terrible at delegation. I mean, that was a weakness for me when I first opened my first startup. I felt like I had to do everything because I was the only one who knew how to do it right. And over the years, I've gotten really, really good at delegation. I mean, like to the point now where I don't check my own emails. I
Yeah, I don't
don't
either.
respond to my own emails
Yeah,
typically.
I
I
don't
don't
either.
make my own schedule. I don't handle day to day problems at the offices typically. I'm often not even involved in the hiring process unless it's a key team member. I'm often not even involved in the firing process unless it's a key team member, unless my input's needed. We unfortunately we had to let go a team member that wasn't a good fit while I was in Italy. I had no idea this happened. I came back and I was informed of it, after the fact. Hey, we had this issue. We had to let this person go. Okay, sounds like you guys handled it well.
Good
So,
leader. Couldn't
yeah,
handle it. Good
no,
on him.
seriously, man. So if I think back to a few years ago, I would have never been okay with this. I would have never let other people make such important decisions without input from me. And I think it's something that a lot of dentists struggle with is they feel like they not only need to be involved in these processes or these decisions, but they need to lead them, or they need to do it all themselves. And eventually, guys, you realize there's only one of you. As much as you'd love to clone yourself and make 5 or 10 or 20 of you, there's only one of you. You only have so much time in the day. And that kind of goes back to the argument of working clinically. Like, I mean, honestly, like I was a high producer. I was doing a lot of cosmetic dentistry. I was doing a lot of Invisalign. If I just wanted to work in my own practice full time, I mean, I could make a very, very good income just doing dentistry full time. However, again, I only have so many hours in the week, and there's a ceiling there. So, I could be working my tail off, 40 hours a week clinically, and eventually you're going to kind of hit that ceiling, and there's nowhere to go from there. Whereas if you can step back and become a true business owner, and you've got the vision to grow a dental group of multiple practices, you can actually work less hours, which is not yet the case for me, but hopefully eventually I'll be working less, than a full-time clinical schedule. You can work less hours and take home more money. And honestly, the income potential is almost unlimited. And it's not just the income. Income is nice, but like what really is life-changing is equity, net worth. And as you grow a dental group, that equity can increase substantially year over year. And that's kind of that long term play that I was talking about earlier. You make the short term sacrifices in income by stepping out of the chair for the long term benefits of increases in equity.
Delegation part's really critical, right? And then I think part of it too is like you kind of touched on it, is after you start delegating, you have to institute some level of personal time management to really prioritize what's important, what's not. I think it's
Yes.
the next place people so it's like you layered this. First one is, am I brave enough to do it? Second one is, am I brave enough to delegate critical tasks? Third one is, how do I manage myself now? Right. And that's something, Ryan here at my company, he put me on a calendar real early in our career. Like, this is your calendar. And I developed culture of my calendar runs my life, right? At least within business hours. And then I know that Energize is at like I think 50 employees or 47 or something. I'm not really sure. And we're at a point now, like I'm like you, I don't answer my own emails. Like there's like two layers to get to me. And it's not like we want to keep people from getting to us, but for us to handle the critical tasks, we need filters in place to make sure that what's important gets to us, and they know our criteria. So I know you just got a personal assistant for the first time. I've had one for a couple of years now, and there is a point where you have to recognize that handing off medial tasks like scheduling meetings to someone else is really critical. So like me and you have to meet, and my assistant talks to your assistant, and they book us, right? We have no idea until we see it on our account. I say I need
Yep.
to talk to Andrew. Andrew
Yep.
says I need to talk to Matt. And there's some day in the future it happens, and me and you don't know it until we see it that morning. Like I
Yes.
literally wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, that's what I'm doing today, right?
Yep.
And what I think that's critical is when you remove those medial tasks, right? If you have three practices, I think you're at a point where you need a personal assistant. I think you should get one before you think you need one.
I've had one for about 6 months, and I should have done it at least a year ago. So I'm with you, Matt. It was one of the best decisions I've made this year. Beyond just freeing up more time for yourself, there is such a thing as decision fatigue.
It helps your focus.
So why are you spending why are you spending that brain power making those kind of trivial decisions as far as like scheduling and all that stuff? Let somebody else handle that so you can really focus on the big picture stuff, the growth, the marketing for your practices, the culture, the systems. I mean, like those are the things that really require your input, but like figuring out when to schedule an appointment, that really shouldn't. The other thing is, and this is important for you as well as your other leaders within your organization, your executive assistant. I'm big on saying yes to opportunities, but I'm also not afraid to say no to things that I don't think I benefit. So, I would say at least half of the people that reach out to me wanting to schedule a meeting or, whatever else it is. And it's not even me saying no usually. It's usually my executive assistant who knows, hey, this isn't something that's going to bring value.
And you have to trust their judgment. You have to trust it.
You have to train them, and then you kind of have to trust their judgment too. But if it's a meeting that they're questioning if this is something that I really need to do, like they'll come to me and be like, hey, do you this person wants a schedule, do you want to get them on the schedule? And then I'll say yes or no as far as if I think that's something that I should be spending my time doing. But guys, as a dental practice owner, there are a million people out there that want to set vendors and this and that want to set meetings with you. You can't be afraid to say no. Otherwise, people are just going to suck up all of that. You're going to have your one admin day a week, and all of a sudden you've got 8 meetings on the schedule. You've got no time to get anything done. It's also training, your executive assistants to schedule efficiently. They know that I like to have larger chunks of time to really get things done. So I hate the days where it's like I've got a meeting at 9 a.m. I've got one at 11:30. I've got one at 2. I've got one at 4:30 because now I get these small chunks of times between each meeting, and it's really hard to get in the zone and get focused and get a bunch of stuff done, even with my to-do list sitting there for me. So, they know that whenever they're setting up like my meeting days, it's like, hey, back to back to back as much as possible. And like honestly, sometimes things run over and that's okay. They'll go ahead and text the next meeting, hey, he's stuck, he's running a few minutes behind, whatever it is. But I would rather things be pushed closer together so I can get all
Yeah.
my meetings out of the way all in a row. And now I've got 4 hours of scheduled time that I can really sit down and get stuff done. So I think it's important how you schedule your time as well.
Yeah, and we'll wrap it up here too. One thing I think is important too is the ability to protect the time. There's one thing to say no to things you don't want to do. There's another thing where like things try to get pushed on your calendar. And there, because right now I'm working on a big project, right? Me and Ryan are working on a project together. It's like a 15-page project. It's pretty big. And like I have these blocks like working on this project. And my team comes to me like, hey, I see you have a 2-hour block. This client really wants to talk to you. Can I slip them in there? No. Like I think part of it is protecting the time. It's okay
Yeah.
to tell, no, that can't be done. Well, just tell them I'm not available, or I'm available in 2 weeks when there's the
Yeah.
next opening, right? But it is really important to protect that productive time because it's real easy to misprioritize it because it's not really like in your head, like it's not spoken for, but it is. It's a meeting with yourself to get the things done that you need to get done to be a leader. I think protecting the time is critical.
I want to just give a little more specifics for you guys on the journey to becoming a CEO of your own dental group or your own dental office. And it's not something that happens overnight. Like you don't just become the CEO of your group. It kind of happens in phases. So, if you think about it, if you're that solo practitioner, you own your practice, you don't work with any associates. My advice in that case is if you're working more than 4 days a week clinically, cut back to 4 days. I mean, I think that should be the most that you're working clinically. And I'll tell you what, guys, you'll find if you condense your schedule from 5 days to 4 days, it's going to decrease your payroll. You're going to be more efficient on those 4 days that you're
You can
there.
do the same amount of work.
You can keep the same production on 4 days as you had on five, and you can be more profitable. And now you've got that fifth day that's a complete admin day for you. So I would say that's phase one. That's step one is if you're working clinically more than 4 days a week, cut out that fifth day or that half day or whatever it is. Give yourself a full admin day where you're CEO. And don't be at the practice. If you do have an associate, don't go to the practice on your off day and try to get stuff done there because everyone's going to want your attention the whole time. You're going to get nothing done.
Oh yeah.
You've either got to have a home office if you can work at home. If you can't, if you've got a few kids and dogs and it's tough for you to do that, then go to the library. Go find some other space where you can focus and really get things done because you have to be efficient with the time. That one day will go by quicker than you know it. As we mentioned earlier, protect that time, schedule smart so that you can have as big of a chunk of time to work on things as possible. But that's phase one. Let's say your practice is growing, maybe you've got an associate or two, maybe you've got a second practice now, that's the point where you really need to be thinking about cutting back to 2 to 3 days a week clinically. Because you're going to want at least 2 full admin days to really run that big practice, multi practices, look at future growth, focus on systems, focus on culture, focus on patient experience, get everything else done. So again, you're at 4 days a week clinically now. You've got that one admin day. Maybe now is when you cut back to 3, and now you've got the 2 full admin days. If you're trying to do what I'm doing and you're trying to grow a larger group, multi practices, 5, 6, 7, 10, whatever the number is, once you get to that certain point, that's where you really need to transition either, down to, like, right now I'm currently at the 1 day a week clinically. So I still go in, I still do Invisalign, I still see, a few cosmetic cases here and there and things like that. It is very, very difficult once you get to this point to get even with, again, that's maybe the point where you're adding an executive assistant as well. You've got 2 or 3 practices. Start beefing up your leadership team. I've got an operations officer, I've got the executive assistant, I've got a fractional CFO. We just actually brought in a fractional CHO, chief hygiene officer.
Oh,
She used to be the chief hygiene officer for a DSO that had over 100 practices. So she's going to come in and kind of help lead and revamp our hygiene department. So beef up your leadership team, get an executive assistant, cut down to 1 or 2 days a week, or maybe get out of the chair completely. That's kind of that final step where you transition to the full-time CEO, and that's probably something that's going to happen in my future. I would say probably sooner than later. If we keep growing at the rate that we are now, it's going to get to that point where, again, you only have so much time in the week, and eventually it's to the point where it's like doing clinical dentistry is not your highest purpose if you're trying to run a medium-sized dental organization. It's just kind of that mindset. Again, you got to do it slowly. You're not going to go from working 4 or 5 days a week to all of a sudden you're out of the chair completely. I think it's good to do it in a transition as you grow. Realize once again that there's a good chance as you cut back significantly, you are going to take home less money, at least in the short term. Hopefully
it's temporary.
it is, but hopefully, you stepping back and giving yourself more admin time and really focusing on being a great CEO for your organization will allow your group to continue to grow, your top line revenue to grow, your profit margin to grow, your EBITDA to grow. And then eventually that profit sharing will replace and hopefully even surpass the income that you're making as a full-time practicing dentist. And then from there, it's just gravy as you continue to grow. So that's the goal. That's a good way to kind of phase it. I don't know, Matt, any other thoughts, any other questions you had on this?
I'm working with Dental Intel's mid-market team and looking at groups your size that we're working with now. We have like a lot of you, like a lot of like 2 to 6s on our service. And I think part of it too is like, humans hyper focus on the negative, and Doc goes, man, I bring an associate on, he takes 32%, my income goes down 10, 20 grand a month, right? I think the thing you have to look at is you have to, in your head, say, you know what, maybe I went down 10, 20 grand a month, but as I build this group, somebody, will call it the equity fairy, is putting $100,000 a month in equity into the company that I see at the end, and it's like a savings account. Like, you can't look at the 20 grand you went down or 10 grand you went down. You got to look at like, how much equity am I adding to the end, and pretend in your head psychologically like it's a savings account.
It's an account that's locked. It's a bond that matures at some point, whatever else. But that's a great way to look at it, Matt.
When
Absolutely.
you hit. Like, it's like
Yeah.
when the 5-year plan happens, that money was there all the time. It was just being put away. And I
Yeah.
think they focus on like, oh, I'm losing 20 grand. Yeah, but you're gaining, 50, 40, 100 grand a month in equity.
Yeah. No, that's great.
And that's the point of being the CEO versus the dentist. You're not looking for production money, you're looking for equity money. That's the shift.
Guys, I hope you found this episode helpful for any of you that have thoughts of this. Again, like I said, this doesn't just pertain to those of you that have multi-practice groups. You could have a single practice, be the only dentist, and you can become a better business owner, better CEO. And it all starts with carving out that dedicated CEO time and really using it efficiently, knowing what you've got to work on. And some of you might even be sitting there thinking like, man, I've got some CEO time, but I have no idea what to work on. Again, my advice, take a look at the systems that are in place in your office. If you don't have great systems in place, start working on them one by one. Systems are living, breathing things that should be updated, as your practice changes, as it grows. Look at growth opportunities for your practice. Look at the culture of your team. Are you doing team surveys as far as like job satisfaction? Are you meeting with your team members? Are you having one-on-ones? Look at your patient experience. Even if you've got we've got over 1,700 five-star reviews at my flagship office. We're still hyper focused on that patient experience. That's a great thing to work on. So like there are a lot of high level things that you should be working on with your CEO time. Obviously there's things that have to happen like payroll and things like that. But, I would just say focus more on the things that are going to have a positive ROI, a positive growth impact on your practice. If you don't know what those are, sit down, try to write them out. If you have more questions specifically, feel free to reach out to me. Usually easiest way to get in touch is shoot me an email. It's docvallodds@gmail.com. As I mentioned earlier, I don't actually check my emails anymore, but my executive assistant will check it and he will, get those messages to me. And I'm happy to try to do my best to give you guys some advice there. So,
All right, guys. So to wrap it up, we talked first about having the bravery to jump in and recognize the discomfort and just go towards it. Then it was the confidence and the ability to delegate is the next layer. Then it was managing yourself as a CEO. And then after that, it was, getting through the transition and starting to analyze your systems and processes and actually using your time efficiently. And that really is, like, that's really, really good 4-layer picture of what it took, right? Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Once again, we don't have sponsors. Me and Andrew do this just because for the community, it's positive. The one thing that makes us feel really rewarded is please share it, please subscribe, and please like, and please leave a review. If you can do that on whatever platform you're listening to this, it really means a lot to us. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Have a wonderful day.
thanks, guys.